Could you compare what you're seeing over these first 5 games with what you've seen over the first 5 games with other young quarterbacks? Because there's a texture kind of correctly calling out some of the media, some of the national media, for allowing and inflaming the conversation that we were just having in the last segment about Jaden Daniels versus Caleb, and it was Caleb versus Justin, and it's been Justin versus Mitch and stuff like that. So maybe you could give the context of what you're seeing Caleb do as compared to other young quarterbacks you have seen, Jason.
I think that especially in Chicago, it helps to compare a little bit or take into account the recent history of the previous 2 quarterbacks that they drafted high in Fields and Trubisky. And if you look at Mitch Trubisky at the end of 2019, so what's that, his 3rd season?
Mm-hmm.
Matt Nagy is airing out publicly that he doesn't yet know how to read defenses consistently and hasn't mastered their offense at that point. End of year 3, Matt. And if you look at Justin Fields, again, it's against the Panthers, but Justin Fields didn't put together the kind of game that Caleb Williams just played probably until the Denver game of last year. So early year 3, which, by the way, is kind of a messy game to bring up for Justin because he helped throw that one away big time at the end. And then he had a really good game the next week against the Commanders. But the point is, it took Justin Fields pretty deep into his timeline to be able to do all of those things, to be able to sit back there and put it all together in one game. And Justin Fields can be a really good quarterback in a game or in a couple of games, a game here and there. He still has yet to be able to do it consistently, and so has Caleb Williams. He's only in his 5th game. But you're seeing just advanced level play by him. I don't think you would hear someone say about Caleb Williams right now what Matt Nagy was saying about Mitch Trubisky of he doesn't know how to read defenses yet, and he doesn't really know how to run our offense yet.
Don't you think those comparisons are actually important for the education of the fan base to understand what kind of development they're seeing?
Yeah, it's just they're important data points. It doesn't have to be about a direct comparison of would you rather have Justin Fields or would you rather have Caleb Williams right now today. And I would much rather have Caleb Williams if I was the Bears, and that's the choice they made. And the offers that they got for Fields versus the offers you could imagine them getting for the number 1 pick this year with Caleb Williams tells you that the rest of the league sees it that way too. I think comparing to these other data points helps you understand, it helps you have some perspective on how well or how slowly things are coming along for Caleb Williams. And Jaden Daniels is a good comparison. Jaden Daniels is somebody that you're going to want to keep an eye on all year. I think the biggest thing I would say, Matt, in that whole argument, though, or that whole conversation is let's not pencil in Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams as a data point 4 or 5 weeks in. Or 2 weeks in. What were we, 2-3 weeks in when people were saying, oh, Jaden Daniels, look at this. The Bears got it wrong. The Bears should have taken Jaden. I mean, I'm sure I heard that on TV within the first 2 or 3 weeks. That's pretty early to be making that kind of declaration.
I'd like to also add to what you're saying, and we're talking with Jason Leisure, who covers the Bears for the Sun-Times as the Bears get ready to play in London this weekend. The other reason why I think looking backwards in Bears history with the quarterback is because you can look and find the places where they messed up with the most recent quarterbacks before Caleb. You can go that situation where you had the coach not knowing and probably not wanting the quarterback that you signed as a free agent being the starter with no intention of playing the guy that you drafted until that guy was such a disaster that you had to make a move, and the only move to make was then to play Mitch when he clearly wasn't ready. And then you can look at the development of Justin Fields and go, they were so hung up on how this was going to look with Andy Dalton, but they weren't brave enough to make Justin Fields a project and say, he's the number 3 quarterback, and we're going to develop him as such. But instead it was, well, we got this package of plays, and we're going to – and the development arc, the whole idea of how a quarterback is trained, I think this right here, the significance of how Caleb has been brought along and seemingly the Bears doing this in a better way, having a better protocol, is why I think looking backwards does make some sense.
That's a really important point. And your guy, Nick Saban, always talks about process versus result. We don't have the result yet on Caleb Williams. And you don't really even have to play the result on Justin Fields or Mitch Trubisky to look at the process and say the process was a debacle with Trubisky for the reasons that you just outlined, and a debacle with Justin Fields for the reasons you just outlined, and very, very sound and prudent, and what any of us would with common sense do when it came to Caleb Williams. The Bears are low-key pretty well run right now. They're really not the same old Bears. I think we talked about this last week, Lawrence. Ryan Poles shifted his tune, I think, I believe it was on draft night when they drafted Caleb Williams. It was the first time I heard him say something kind of stern about, we need to throw out this history, enough of this history.
Yep.
Because prior to that, Ryan Poles had been, we've had many conversations on and on the record and in interviews and stuff where he said he knows that all the Bears' history at quarterback is not his fault, but he's very aware of the waters he's swimming in. He's very aware of what it means, even in his first or second year, to ask Bears fans to be patient, which I'm 40 years old and grew up in Chicago, and that's all they've ever done is ask for your patience. Always. A perpetual ask. And so when he says, hey, we're not the same old Bears, that's, paraphrasing what he said, it's true. And that's why they would have cut Justin Fields had they not found a trade partner for him. They would not have done it wrong. They were not in any way going to have a foolish process with Caleb Williams.
So where does Matt Eberflus fit in to this team being well run? I think there's some people that separate him and Poles. Should they be?
I do. Yeah, I think Poles has done a really good job, and I think Eberflus has left. There's a lot to prove still. And even now, he's steadied things these last 2 weeks. Think about how we look at him right now today versus coming off the Indy game, which was just ham-handed in every possible way. And now we look at him and say, okay, things are calmer for now. You still kind of have this big burden of proof on him to show that he can keep it calm even as they get against better teams, and to show that he can direct the offense, because that's part of a head coach's job, even if you spent your entire career on defense. But Matt, right now, and I'm saying this to myself too, if we're going to put Matt Eberflus under the microscope for all of the problems that they've had with game management and with the offense and with things we didn't necessarily like seeing in Caleb Williams' performance the first 3 weeks, then we also have to give him credit when he says, hey, I'm going to get involved in this offense and I'm going to go to where the trouble is and work on this. When you see things going better, he deserves some credit for that. Things are calm and headed the right way right now today as we speak.
He also deserves some credit for at least fostering the atmosphere where this leadership council feels enabled and empowered to go ahead and tell the coaches what they think. And this is continues to be a good thing. Do we know where the no huddle, where so much no huddle came from? Whose idea that was? Was it as palpably different this past week than it was the first 4 weeks of the season in this offense, Jason?
I would think that is something that Caleb Williams has pushed for, because he's been pretty good at that. He not only is good at that, but I think it's comfortable for him. And you see him being able to move and, more importantly, think at a fast pace. You did see some game operation type issues those first 3 weeks with, getting to the line late or getting to the line too late and getting a delay of game, things like that. Just kind of this rushed. Sometimes you don't get a delay of game, but you rush the play so much that it's a little off just from the jump. And I didn't really see any of that the last 2 weeks. He was pretty. Maybe I'm missing something as I'm kind of scrolling back through my mind over the last two games, but it looked pretty smooth as far as the part that Caleb Williams can control and is in charge of.
You are one of the most compassionate people that I know, and I know that sometimes can be in conflict when it comes to covering a football team.
That sounded very personal and very like you guys know each other.
He's literally one of my best friends.
Interesting.
How concerned are you about Jaquan Brisker?
Oh, man. Very, because you don't even know how many concussions he's had. You don't know which ones have been diagnosed or not diagnosed. and he's so young, and I feel like we've had so many conversations about this already. It's very concerning. And if you find these guys, though, Tua's in the same situation right now. Like, do you think Tua's going to retire, Lawrence, even after all this?
No, I think that as soon as he's cleared, he's going to be back out there. And I think that, especially considering how badly things have gone for the Dolphins since he left, I think they will welcome him back and celebrate him being back.
It's troubling, but I think I think you're right. But it's troubling because I think guys, if they're going to play football, then they're in for the concussions, and maybe you will have they're willing to tolerate that. They're willing to accept that part of it. And maybe you have guys who get one really bad one and it scares them, and they say, okay, I can't keep doing this to myself. But I think more often than not, you get guys who go into it accepting it, and there is little to no consideration given to the long-term effects. And I haven't really had any conversations with this with Jaquan Brisker about this recently. I do believe this came up with him last year about continuing to play through this. And I mean, this is what he does. This is what he does. What would you want him to do? He would have to stop playing football, or he'd have to stop playing the way he plays, which it makes him good.
Yeah.
I mean, part of what's dangerous for him, it makes him a dangerous defensive player. It would be difficult for a player in his position who plays his style to change that for health reasons.
What would his absence mean to the functionality of a really good secondary against a smart quarterback who has had his troubles, obviously, this year? But what would Brisker's absence mean, Jason?
He's just an explosive playmaker, Matt. But I would say that their secondary is the best it's been. I can't remember the last time it was this well stocked. And I think the last year of Ryan Pace running the team, they had Jalen Johnson and a bunch of practice squad guys. And then they go into this year with three starting corners that you really like, two safeties that you really like, a promising, very promising young up-and-comer in Brisker, and a two-time All-Pro in Kevin Byard. And they have three corners you could play in a pinch if you needed to. And they have depth at safety with Elijah Hicks and other guys. Like, I think that they can survive Jaquan Brisker missing time more than they could some other positions. Now, that I don't want to discount what an explosive playmaker is. I think they can get steady replacement level play for Jaquan Brisker. They can't get somebody that's going to blitz like he does and make explosive plays like he does, turnovers and things like that.
I'd offer the 2006 defensive backfield. Maybe the 2000.
Heck of a long time ago.
I know. Maybe the 2012 one, because I think Tim Jennings made the Pro Bowl that year, but you've got Charles Tillman and Nathan Vasher as your corners.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Brown, Chris Harris, and Daniel Manning.
Forgot it's Chris Harris, too.
Like, that's real
been a lot of seasons since then, though. Been a lot of Artie Burns since then.
You're correct. You are definitely correct on that. What do you think of the Bears' choice of traveling on yesterday, them taking off? Because I know that there isn't a lot of data on how to do this, but I thought it was interesting that they made that choice.
I think it makes total sense. I think if you are encountering some out of the ordinary issue in terms of climate or time zone difference, so I would apply a similar thinking to going to Seattle or LA, or especially somewhere like Denver where the altitude is a factor. Maybe if you're going down to play one of the Florida teams when it's still hot down there in October or September, you want to get down there and acclimate to it. And in the case of London, I mean, I flew last night too, and I got 1.5 hours of sleep maybe on that flight. It's hard for me to think about being a professional athlete and doing what they did 5 years ago, where they had basically a normal day at Hallis Hall on Thursday of that week, then flew Thursday night into Friday morning. Let's get out there Friday for a little walkthrough, and 2 days later we're going to play a game. I can't imagine everybody felt their best. That's not why necessarily. That's not a one obvious reason why they lost that game to the Raiders back then, but I don't think it helped. The sooner they were to get out here and get used to everything and kind of get rested and be feeling somewhat normal, the better for them. So this makes perfect sense to me what they did.